Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Hello Awesome podcast. JC here, and I have an amazing guest, Samantha. I am so excited to finally sit down and chat with you. I know we kind of geek out a little bit on some similar things that maybe will be surprising to people, but before we get into it, can you please just share with us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored to be here. I think what you're doing is tremendous in terms of putting out podcasting, talking about various topics to the apostolic Pentecostal community and others. So I think that's awesome. My name is Samantha Teal. Very nice to meet everybody. I work in the litigation space, so I own a trial consulting company as well as a court reporting company. And I also put on trial lawyer conferences. Essentially, what I do is I help lawyers prepare their cases for trial. I guess it's the easiest way I could explain it.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to me in many ways because a lot of people don't know, but I'm like a law nerd. I have these lawyers that I am so dedicated to who have YouTube channels. And usually, if I follow like a criminal case or even, just any cases out there, I will go through their channels because as they are going through the trial, they will pause and actually give commentary. And I've learned so much about our nation and the laws and how, litigation really works and how the justice system kind of works. So I'm so fascinated. But how did you, because you were talking earlier, it's a little bit unconventional, but how did you get started in the litigation and consulting field?
Yeah, so my story of how I got involved in litigation is very out of the blue. It was definitely all God. So after graduating high school, I've been raised in church my whole life. So it was very much so like, get married, have kids, and that was always the goal of mine and still is to this day. But God had different plans, and those plans involved being involved in the law. And so after I graduated high school, I worked at a like real estate law firm doing some real estate law and mostly title work. And I enjoyed it, but kind of at the age of 19 was like, okay, I'm ready to just move on to something else. And started praying, asking God, like, what would you have me to do? Where do you want me to go? I at one point wanted to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, but I'm like, do I want to go through all those years of school and then have kids? And, I want to be around my kids. And so, long story short, I got a call one day out of the blue. I was 19, and it was my mom. She was at my brother's little league baseball game. And I happened to not go to that game. And she said, "You're never going to believe who's here." And I said, "Who?" And she mentioned the name of a lawyer. His name's Jeffrey Feiger. And I said, "Who's that? I don't know who that is." At the time, I didn't know he was a very, very well-known lawyer in the state that I reside, which is in Michigan. He had run for governor. He had done some of the largest well-known trials in the country. So like Dr. Jack Kevorkian, his criminal trial, just a lot of different like well-known cases. So I Googled him and like a page came up and I saw they had done a movie about him and the Dr. Jack Kevorkian cases. I was like, oh wow, this guy's like a really big deal. And my mom's like, she, long story short, walked up to him and said, "Hi, Mr. Biker, you don't know me, but you need to hire my daughter." I mean, absolutely crazy. I love my mom. To this day, if it wasn't for my mom and obviously the Lord, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. And so, long story short, I went and interviewed, and um, he offered me the job of being an assistant for him. And he said, "Do you know anything about the law?" And at that time, I didn't know what a plaintiff was. I didn't know a defendant, nothing. And he said, "Well, I'll teach you." And so there began my beginning intro into the law. And now I've been in this space for 10 years, which is crazy because it just flew like that. But that was kind of how I got involved in the law from the beginning.
10 years is a long time. That's so awesome. And for him to just take a chance on you, he must have saw your eagerness to like learn. That's so cool. I think there's something to be said of having a mentor, even in the career space that you want to go into. We talk about discipleship and mentorship a lot in the church, but that should flow also in our careers as well. Of like find somebody who can come alongside you and teach you if you don't know something. That's so cool. Well, kudos to your mom. That's awesome.
Thank you. She's amazing. I agree with you. I just had a conversation with someone the other day. I was in Los Angeles. I had a trial out there. I'm based out of Detroit, Michigan, but I had a case out there, and I was telling somebody like, if someone tells me that they got somewhere on their own, first off, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I disregard that because I don't think there's
Yeah.
anyone who gets anywhere and is successful on their own without number one, the help of God, and number two, other people. I would not be where I am today if others didn't take the time to mentor me. And I still to this day continue to have mentors in business, in church, and in my personal life that help me because we're always at like we have this potential for growth, right? So I'm never thinking, oh, I've reached my ceiling of growth, whether it's in my business or in God, right? We
Yeah.
could always go further. So it's having the proper people in place to help you achieve those goals and mentor you, in leadership to those points and where you need to be. So I'm very thankful. I've been very blessed, and I'm definitely humbled that God see fit to put me in this space.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I even just thinking about my journey as well, people can be like, oh, you just turned on a camera and you were fine. And it's like, no, I was blogging in like the early 2000s when people were on like Blogger,
Yeah,
and I was trying to
I
figure it
wanted to be a
out.
blogger before I got like I was 18. I'm like, well, I'm gonna blog about
Yeah,
fashion, and then I was like,
yeah.
nah, I'm not gonna do that. But that's hilarious.
Yeah, and I wasn't about fashion, but I was about all this other stuff. However, I did have somebody come alongside me as well and hired me to be a content creator for her. And she runs DIY candy. And what was the other one? Um, oh gosh, I'm gonna butcher it. But it was like I don't know, just like all the crafty blogs when they were really like big in the
Yeah,
2000s. She like ran two of the biggest ones. Um, and Mod Podge. I don't know if you heard of Mod
I feel
Podge.
like I've heard of that. I'm not super familiar with it, but I've heard of
It's fine. But it was called like Mod Podge Rocks, and it was all about using that Mod Podge in your crafting. But anyways, she knew that I want to launch a t-shirt line. This was before like you could automate a lot of things, before you can have these like print on demand companies. And I knew like I would have to raise money to like get the actual t-shirts and print them myself. And so she paid me like a good amount for each post that I gave her. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have launched like the Hello Awesome t-shirts that blew up, and then it kind of like went into the direction that I feel like God wanted me to go. But I had to
yeah,
kind of like humble myself as like a student and just this is what's presented to me right now. It may not be what I want to do forever, but she's teaching me tools. And so learning how to create content through her and her encouragement, it helps me like right now
yeah.
doing what I need to do. So we definitely do not make it on our own.
Mm-mm. I think that's incredible. And to your point, I think that, we're all presented with opportunities, and in the beginning, you have to see it as what it is, right? So when I first started working there, I had at my old firm worked my way up to becoming a manager. So I went from being a manager to an assistant. Now, albeit I was an assistant of a very well prominent lawyer in the community, so that was very big. But as someone who was in a leadership role, going from leadership to working for Lee, it was somewhat difficult in the
Yeah.
sense that it was like, not that it wasn't a devalue by any means, but it was hard. And so, but to your point, uh, I saw the value in the opportunity and the doors that could potentially be opened in that who he was, who he surrounded himself with, and just learning a new area of business. And I never anticipated that it would turn into what it's turned into today. But if I hadn't open myself up to the possibility of this opportunity and realizing that like, okay, I may not know everything about this. It's maybe not necessarily what I want to be doing right now, but being open to it, led to where we're at today, right? So you
Yeah.
have to be open to any opportunity, even if it's maybe not in exactly what you want to do. Obviously you have to be selective. Now there's some things that come across that I'm like, okay, I don't want to do that. I know where my goals are aligned. But keeping an open mind is very important. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, watching live trials has
Yeah.
been such a rush. I got into it, I think it was a little after like COVID, and that's when it kind of took off, I think, for a lot of content creators who are in the law, because then the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial went
Yes.
just viral. And watching that live taught me so much about context, about facts, about not grabbing on the headlines and taking that as fact, knowing what I knew at the time of sitting down and watching like every single moment, not just because it was entertaining, because that was part of it, but
Yeah.
watching how I believe it was a civil lawsuit, defamation lawsuit, which so learning about defamation, learning about the difference between criminal and civil, that was just so interesting to me. And also seeing how the media spun things around. And I was sitting there like, well, that didn't happen during the trial, was just eye opening to me in many ways. So, um, when it comes to your experience, what has been the reaction of people in the church who find out your line of work?
So, um, in my church where I go to, I've gone to my own entire life. So everyone kind of knows, that's what I've been involved in there, the career I'm in. I would say people outside the church are somewhat surprised, just in the sense that it's very rare for a female in the church, number one, to have a career. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just most of the time, as you get married, you have kids, right?
Yeah,
And number two is the law is very interesting. So I think a lot of people have a lot of preconceived ideas and notions about it
yeah.
without understanding it. I think a lot of people just assume that, they assume a lot of things about it. Let's just say that. So I think
Yeah.
just more like a shock and then a lot like inquisitive and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, the asking questions and being inquisitive probably is not as bad as some other slide remarks, but I will say, I know for me, one of the preconceived ideas that I had is just how you naturally feel, let's just say, for example, about the word defendant. And that instant, like, oh, negativity. But the more that I've watched trials, I sympathize so much with like defense attorneys more than I thought I would because I see how there's an advocacy there and why our system kind of works the way it does so that people do have a proper, you know, um, unbiased representation. And so talking to people now who don't watch live trials, I can see, how there's still that like disdain for just like defense or defense attorneys or whatever, even like towards the law in general.
Yeah.
And I feel like watching it, I'm like more appreciative of our laws in our system, even though it's not perfect. I'm so appreciative of the country that we live in and how those who came before us tried to do the best that they can to make sure that it was fair.
Yeah, I think that a few things. So I'm glad that you have that attitude. I wish more people did because people don't understand that we have the best justice system in the entire world, right? There are some countries where you don't get a right to have a trial by
Yeah,
jury, right? And it's a trial by jury of your peers, right? Your
yeah,
fellow man. And so the whole process is to find people who are, unbiased who come into there. And we all have biases, whether it's like I like peanut butter and jelly, you don't like peanut butter and jelly. It's something as small as that. But how do we bring those biases into a court where we're supposed to be equal, right? So the scales of
right.
justice, they're even, right? And really, Lady Justice is blind. It's very much so you're innocent until proven guilty. And so the fact that we are afforded that opportunity is an incredible thing that you can come before a jury of your peers, and they can listen to the facts and the evidence and determine in an unbiased way, guilty, not guilty. I do all civil cases. So,
Sure.
more likely than not, was this as a result of this? Do you get damages? And
Right.
it's it sounds weird. I've been doing trials now for over 10 years. And every time I sit there and the jury comes in, I get this rush and feeling of like, this is incredible. Because it's an opportunity. And so I think when people get jury duty, they hate it, but they don't realize how vital jury duty is to our system. If we didn't have jury duty, then it would be judges and Congress and all the, all not Congress, but juries or judges and all these ones making decisions without us having an opportunity to have a voice. And that's
Right.
really what our system is. It's a voice, an opportunity to provide a voice to those who otherwise wouldn't have it. And so I think it's the most incredible system in the world. And it's something that I'm forever grateful to have had an opportunity and have the opportunity to be involved in because you're changing people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that I I have to be the main caregiver and I get jury duty, I'm like, ah. Like
Yeah.
I want to do it now, but I actually can't.
They will never let me on a jury. I had jury duty once, and I walked in and I knew the judge who was sitting on the bench because I had had some cases in front of him with my old boss. And he like looked at me, I looked at him, and I was like, "We all know you're not going to let me on." Which I think it would be so much fun. But yeah, they
Yeah.
never let me sit on a jury.
Yeah, I always have more compassion for juries, especially if it's like longer cases. I know recently watching like the Karen Reed trial and the poor jurors had to be there for so long. I think the biggest one was probably the Murdaugh trial, and it was extended. So like the jury had to be there extra long, and these people are giving up their life for to like be there. And most of them don't want to be there. And so I just feel like let's just have compassion for like our fellow men and women that have to sit there because they're supposed to be the voice of the people and we may not agree, but it's the fairest way to do it, I think.
Right. I think so too. And it's getting a group of people with all different ideologies, backgrounds, careers, all that together to say, hey, let's see if we can come to a decision. I think it's just incredible. To this day, it's funny because when you're involved in it, right,
Yeah.
I don't stop to think these comments, right? But when I sit here and think about it, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, do you believe that we as Christ-centered citizens need to be more educated about our judicial system?
Yes, 1,000%. I think we need to be more educated on
Mm.
our judicial system, what's going on in current times. People laugh at me, and it sounds funny, but when I turned 18, I started that internship at a law firm, and it sounds so stupid, but I had to be at work at 6 a.m. every day, and at 5:30, I would stop at Starbucks and I'd get a copy of the New York Times. Now, I know a lot of people have opinions now as to like real journalism, and we're not going to get into that. But
Sure.
I would read it every morning. Like looking back, it's like, okay, it's kind of weird what 18-year-old girl is reading the New York Times. But it taught me a valuable thing, being informed. And when you're
Yeah.
more informed, you have more knowledge. And not only that, it makes you more diverse as a person. So when you're going into business with people who are not Christians or who don't have the same belief systems, ideologies, you can have a conversation. And conversations are what help leads to not only development as you as a human being, as a Christian, to be a witness, but also business development. A lot of my clients that I've worked with, or people that I know, or even my business partners in my court reporting company, all stem from just having a conversation with people. And so I think it's so important to be informed of not only how our judicial system works, but also the current events happening around because I mean, ultimately, if you look, most people in Congress are lawyers, right? Our whole pretty much government is set up by lawyers. Lawyers are the foundation of our judicial system. And so I know we get I'm not a lawyer, but I know the legal system and litigation gets a lot of hate, but I don't think people truly understand the value of it and what would be the difference if it wasn't there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just being informed and having conversations. We don't do it enough. And so much would be healed, so much would be just kind of forgiven if we would just be open to having conversations with each other, even if we don't agree. I think, civil discourse is such a lost art. And I'm a millennial, so I remember like disagreeing with people and having civil discourse in high school. And you just are like, okay, not a big deal. The times have changed a little bit on that, and I kind of grieve for this generation who may not understand the value of having people in your life who you don't agree with, but you can still have common ground and maybe some understanding and just having an open conversation and how valuable that is, I think, to society as a whole.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that, there's a lot of people that I don't agree with, whether it's their ideologies, their beliefs, their political, whatever it is. But you can still be a kind human being and talk to them and have a conversation. And you know what I've learned? Is I learned a lot more talking to people that I don't agree with than the people I do agree with. Like I want to hear
Yeah.
why do you believe that way? Because how can you ever, and maybe this is like the legal person in me, however can you counter something with an alternate viewpoint if you won't listen?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Listening is huge.
Yeah.
Another lost art for sure. It's funny. That's actually one of the reasons why I started this podcast, and I didn't want it to just be me in front of a mic because I could talk all day. I have no problem talking all day. But
Yeah.
The Lord wants me to listen and to bring people on to listen, to learn from other people. And that's why, I reach out to certain people that are just different and have just these amazing testimonies of what God is doing in their life because we need to learn from each other. And I think a lot of people say that's why we have, two ears and one mouth, so we can try to listen twice as much. And I really do think that is so, so true. So people are obsessed with true crime. And I was so kind of taken back by how many people are obsessed with it in the church. But Um, I realized too, a lot of people are obsessed with it, but they don't know the law. They're obsessed with the drama, the details, all of that. And I understand that. It's become more entertainment. Even for us in the church, we're like, oh, wow, that's, something interesting. But in your opinion, what are the positives and the negatives to this?
Okay, so this is funny because I don't do criminal cases.
Right.
And I do know some criminal, like I see criminal, like I deal with some criminal stuff in the sense of like, sometimes there's a criminal aspect to a civil case, right? Or there's a
Sure.
civil case that stems out of a criminal proceeding. To answer your question, I think it goes back to being informed, right? What are we putting in our minds? And is it being helpful to us or is it hurting us?
Yeah.
I mean, just me speaking, I think if I constantly listened to true crime, it would create fears and phobias. Now, let's just put it this way. I have to see a lot of bad things, a lot. That's
Hmm.
enough, let alone putting more in there.
Right.
But I think it goes back to being informed. Like, is what you're listening to, like, do you understand the context around what's going on? Do you understand, like, if you're not learning, and this, I get, there's sometimes we want to like just listen to things just to like relax, right? But try to listen to something that's going to help you learn. So if you're just
Yeah.
listening to true crime, I mean, this is just my opinion, and it's not. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm not answering this question the best way. I I think that it has some benefit, but if you don't understand a lot of the things, I think it can be more hurtful than helpful.
No, I think you nailed it. I think that's exactly it. I think it's always, no matter what it is, being conscious of how is it making you feel? Are you now more afraid to go to the grocery store? Are you more afraid bringing your kids to the park? Then maybe put down that true crime podcast for a while. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I mean, we definitely have to be aware, right? And I think it creates an awareness, but at the same time, there's a balance center. So if
yeah.
you're listening to it to the point where you're freaking yourself out, what benefit is that providing you?
Right, of course. And also, does God really want you to think about these things all of the time? I don't think He really wants us to do that with our mind. And I think, like you said, sometimes life itself and what you're doing, you're getting enough of that, especially with your line of work. So just be conscious of your overall mental health, sometimes your physical health. If you have a physical reaction to something,
Yeah.
maybe spend some time praying and asking God about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we consume, just like food, right? The food we consume affects our natural gut health, and the things we consume spiritually, the things we listen to, the things we watch, that affects our spiritual health.
Okay, so we have to talk about it. You worked on a case that obtained a verdict recently, and the story went viral. Mainstream media picked it up. Even Tucker Carlson spoke about it, which was crazy. So, can you share with us what the case was and why you think it piqued the interest of the public the way that it did?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my client, his name's John Marco. He's a very good friend of mine. He's the lawyer that represented this woman. Essentially, a woman worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, which is the largest, I believe, one of the largest insurance companies here in the state and nationally. And she had worked there for approximately, I think it was over 27 to 30 years. I'm terrible. Sometimes it's like I get into these trials and I observe, get all the information it's like a bathtub. I like drain it all out. I get done with my next trial, move on to the next one. So it
Yeah.
was about 27 years. And she, long story short, they mandated, this was about 2021, they mandated that all employees were supposed to get the COVID vaccination. And she was a woman of faith and she began to study it. And I was not aware of this until this case, I became involved in this case. The COVID vaccine, that I believe is when they created it or did some of the studies, they used aborted fetus cells. And so, due to her religious beliefs, she felt convicted and went to her priest and said, I feel like the Lord is convicting me that this isn't something I should put on my body. My body's a temple. And he said, you have to follow your conscience, your convictions. So she told her employers that. Long story short, they fired her. And so my client, John Marco, took on these cases and we went to trial. And at trial, we got over $13 million dollars as a verdict in response to this. It was an incredible result. He did an amazing job. It was the honor of a lifetime to work on this case with him. But it was a very, very interesting case in the sense that it had all of the topics that are very heavily disputed nowadays in our society: abortion,
Yep.
vaccines, and religious beliefs. I mean, those are like the three hot topics, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like imagine going in front of it trying to pick a jury to a bunch of people where it's like it's very diverse in terms of opinions on these topics. And so our whole position was this really isn't about abortion. It's not about whether or not you want to take the COVID vaccine. And it's really not about, those two topics. What it's about is your freedom of choice, your freedom to follow your conviction, your religious convictions, your freedom to make the decision about what you want to do according to your religious beliefs. And so the jury came back and gave us an incredible award. This was a case in federal court. And I think because of the nature of the topics of it, it blew up very fast in the media because I think there was a lot of people, and I'm not taking a position one way or the other. I have my own personal beliefs that are between me and God, but
Right.
I think a lot of people got fired for refusing the COVID vaccine. due to their sincerely held religious beliefs. And so I think that this was something that a lot of people who had been fired felt like it was justice because like I lost my whole livelihood. You know, these
Mm-hmm.
people worked for, different people who have lost their jobs, worked for these companies for years. And then because they
Right.
make the decision of their sincerely held religious for right beliefs, they don't want to take something, so they get fired. So it was a very, very interesting case. And I think because of it, it just naturally blew up because of the topics and just the result was incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. That really is incredible. And I can't even imagine, all the preparation that you guys had to do when picking that jury. So obviously the Lord's hand was on you. But I feel this just kind of kind of reestablishes just my gratitude for this country and the principles that were laid out by our founding fathers. Howbeit they aren't perfect, they weren't perfect. Nobody is perfect. But the fact that they really tried to put the citizens first and try to give us the best possible tool so that we could be a free nation. And I think that's hopefully what people get out of, you know, um, learning about this is being grateful for what we have and that we have a nation who really tries to fight for our freedoms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should all be able to go into a court and fight for what we believe is right if it's in accordance to the Constitution and the laws. And if you
Yeah.
feel like that was breached or broken, you should have the opportunity to present that in front of a jury. And that's what we
Right.
did.
Right, exactly. So then, how is your approach to a case as a professional who loves and follows Jesus? I know that can be very personal. Obviously, you can go as deep as
Yeah.
you want with this, but like I said, like I find it just so interesting as somebody who has their own convictions, who loves the Lord, and you also have to be a professional. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So I think our walk with God should be ingrained into everything we do, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how I present myself, how I speak, things of that nature. Uh, there's certain cases I won't take if I feel like, what, that goes against my belief, my personal beliefs.
Yeah.
Um, then there's cases where I'm like, okay, you know what, this aligns with what I feel. I'm thankful that I get the opportunity to pick and choose, right? Some
Right.
people aren't afforded that opportunity, so I get to pick and choose kind of who I want to work with, and the types of cases that I will work on. There have been times in the past where people have contacted me like, would you be involved with this case? Um, I was actually contacted about a case involving a former president and his family, and I said, I don't feel comfortable. I'm not going to do that just because of my own personal beliefs involving that whole situation. And so, yeah, I think knowing your convictions and, going into the case, does this align with my personal belief system? And am I on the right side of justice? That
Mm.
ultimately is what it comes down to for me is, you know, my beliefs and then am I on the right side of justice? There's some cases I'm not going to do it if I feel like someone did something completely blatantly wrong and I won't do it because I can't fight for something I don't personally believe in.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's such a good piece of advice for anybody who is in any job. If you
Yeah,
have a conviction, it really has to be something that, you have to allow the Lord to help you with when it comes to each situation that is presented to you or each I don't want to say issue, but opportunity
yeah,
that comes your way. And so you have to go like look at each opportunity individually and ask the Lord to help you and to dictate which way to go.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to women's intuition, there's definitely something to be said about that.
Yeah.
I've gone into meetings and I've instantly, like, because I do this for a living, you learn to read people, mannerisms, trust your gut. I've gone into meetings and instantly been like, nope, not doing it. And I think it's really ultimately your Holy Ghost, right, is telling you. And
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. It's a little awkward. Well, why can't you be involved? I just, making a decision not to.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily the Lord has blessed me enough that having been in the industry for so long, 10 years now, I get to work with a lot of people that are my friends that I know personally, that I have great relationships with. So, um, luckily it's worked out.
Yeah. So then, what would you say to a listener who would like a career in litigation, but they're concerned about having their convictions challenged? Maybe they feel like they can't do it, that they won't be strong enough.
Yeah, I think number one is prayer. I got into law through prayer and I asked God, is this what you want me to do? And it's funny. So the story of I was 18 when I got my, or not 19 when I got my job working at my old firm. And I prayed prior to going there. I said, God, I kind of feel like Joseph going before Pharaoh right now. I mean, my old boss, who was my mentor, um, he was very well known, very prominent. And I'm just like, 19-year-old girl. I don't know anything about the law. I felt like Joseph going before Pharaoh. And I prayed and said, God, if this is your will, then confirm that. And I turned on the radio. No, 2 seconds later, the woman on the radio goes, sometimes you feel like Joseph going before Pharaoh, but you got to do it. I'm like, okay, God, that was my sign. I know I'm supposed to move forward with this. My prayer is always like, if this isn't your will, slam the door in my face. I'd rather get a slam door in my face than to walk through a door that I was never meant to walk through. Now, are there doors that God opens that you're gonna have to walk through and you're gonna go through some tribulation, test, process? Absolutely. Over my 10-year career, has there been moments of uh, you know, restlessness, not feeling at peace, having made mistakes? Absolutely. I wouldn't be human if I haven't, but it's understanding and overcoming those. I was telling someone the other day, it's not about winning uh, winning the battle, it's about winning the war. So through life, we're going to win some battles and we're going to lose some battles. You're not going to win every battle, it's just human flesh. But it's how you recover after losing a battle. And at the end of the day, as long as you win the war, no one remembers every battle you may have won or lost. It's what the end result is. So I think if you're deciding to go into the law, pray about it, number one. Number two, do your research. Is this something that I'm genuinely interested in? I truly believe that you should never be working a job or be involved in something where you're not happy. Now, let me preface that. A lot of us don't like a job that we first get into, right? Okay. There's certain jobs that you do because we got to make money, we got to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
I've definitely been there. But it's understanding, okay, my rule was always I stay someplace 2 years, even if I don't like it, because that shows somebody that I'm consistent. So my next job, if they're looking at my resume, they show that. So you might have a 2-year period where you don't feel comfortable in that, but you may realize, okay, I'm not really into the law at this point, then get out of it. If you're still enjoying it, continue to pursue it. And if you're pursuing something that you're passionate about, God will bless you in it. So, number one,
Mhm.
pray about it. Number two, research it. And number three, if you're passionate about it, pursue it.
Yeah. That's so good. Samantha, thank you so much for just being on the podcast, for just sharing. I mean, this is truly like your passion. I could hear it in your voice. Um, I don't even have to like see you in action. I already know that you're like good at what you do. And just because I can tell that you have that fire like shut up in your bones about this. So, can you just share with everybody listening where they can follow you on social media and just get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help anybody. If you ever have any questions, like I talked about earlier, we never got anywhere on our own, right? It's others helping us. So I always would love to help and mentor and do anything that I can to help anybody. So the best number or best way to reach me is on social media is Samantha Teal on my Instagram. And then my business is SMT Litigation Consulting. But my personal Samantha Teal Instagram is always the best way to reach me. I see my messages there. And yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking to you. It's always fun talking to a fellow woman of faith, and especially about the law. So,
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and I know we'll be talking more about it soon. So,
yeah, absolutely.
thank you so much.